everybody, I decided to make a video out of part 2 because I think that's best. That way you have time to pause this as you need. All right, so part 2 is kind of the opposite of what we did Monday and Tuesday. Instead of having you graph it, we're going to do the opposite. I'm going to give you the graph and ask you for an equation. So you can pause here and write down these notes real quick. I'm going to explain them as well. So the equation we're going to write out is, don't forget that A value in the front is the stretch or compress, and we're also going to label it orientation because it tells us positive or negative orientation. And then each of these represent the x-intercepts in factored form. So we would have to put more if this is like 1, 2, 3. This is a third root, but we'd have to add another for a fourth root or a fifth root or sixth root. So this is what we're going to try to work on right now. So you do not have to draw the graph that's coming up. You simply have to write down what I'm writing. So here's what we're given on example 1. We're given a graph and we want to write the equation of this graph. Y equals sum A. Now let's think about, what do we know? What degree is this? Well, I notice the arrows are opposite ways, which means this is odd. Evens face the same. And then I see 1 intercept, 2 intercept, 3 intercept. So I see 3 intercepts and none of them are double roots because none of them bounce off. They slice through, slice through, slice through the axis. So I'm thinking this is an x cubed. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write down x minus, and I'm going to write 3 parentheses because I have 3 roots, x minus, x minus. Okay, I'm confident that you guys can figure out what goes in this in your head so that this is a -3. So what would have to be written in this first parenthesis in order to get a root of -3? It'd have to be a +3. This is a 0, so x minus 0, which we can just simplify to x. And then x minus, in order for this to be a +2, this must be a -2. Okay, now this is close to the answer, but we don't want this A here. So in order to solve for that A, we're going to plug in a point. The easiest point to plug in is usually the y-intercept. But the problem is the y-intercept is also the x-intercept, and we've already used it. So we're not going to use that one. Instead, we're going to use one of the labeled points. It doesn't matter which one. I'm going to go ahead and use this labeled point of -2, +8. -2x, +8y. And those are the numbers I'm going to fill in right here. And that'll leave me with just an A to solve. Okay, so instead of y, I'm going to write 8 equals A, -2 plus 3, -2 minus 0, and then I'm just going to write it down here because I'm losing space, -2 minus 2. Okay, so I filled in my x's and my y's, and all that's left is this A. So let's keep solving. 8 equals A, -2 plus 3 is 1, -2 minus 0 is -2. This would make -4. Okay, we keep solving. 8 equals 8a. -2 times -4. Divide both sides. A equals 1. So what is my final answer to this question? I'm simply going to erase this A that was there and fill in the number 1. And this is the equation that makes this graph. Does it make sense that A is positive? Yes, because this is a normal roller coaster where you get on from the bottom. How could I check that this is correct? Well, if it's a homework assignment, I can go to Desmos and type in this equation, and I should expect to see this. And so the next screen has that. I typed in that equation, and Desmos shows the exact points we had figured out, and they're correct. So you can use Desmos as a tool to check if you got it right. Okay, we are going to do one more example. You can always rewatch this video in case you need extra help. So here's our next example. I want you to think about what degree this is. Okay, so let's see. This is an even degree because the arrows are facing in the same way. And let's see, I have 1, 2, and 3 roots, but it shouldn't be 3, it should be even. And that's because this is a double root. So I'm going to write my equation as y equals, I don't know, a, x. If this is -3, it has to go in as +3. If this is -1, it has to go in as +1, right? Because solving this would give me that root. And finally, +2, this has to be x minus 2, but it has to be a squared because it's a double root. Okay, that is not a good enough answer. We need to be able to solve for A, and we're going to do that by picking any point. I can pick any point, but usually the easiest is the y-intercept because at least something's a 0. And this should be clearly labeled on the assignment. On the assignment, it says what the y-intercept is. For here, it's 24. So on this one, it's 24. So this is 24 up. So what point are we plugging in? We're plugging in our y-intercept, which is at 0 over 24 up. That's why it's always easier to pick the y-intercept, just because it's a 0. Zeros are always easier to plug in. So now I'm going to plug in these numbers. 24 is y equals x is 0, so 0 plus 3, and 0 plus 1, and 0 minus 2 squared. Okay, let's simplify this, and there's an A in front. I forgot the letter A. Okay, so let's simplify this. 24 equals A. 0 plus 3 is 3. 1 plus 0 is 1. -2 squared is +4. 3 times 4 is 12. So 24 equals 12A. Divide both sides by 12, and A equals +2. Was I expecting a positive A? Yes, because both arrows are facing up, which means it's a positive orientation. So what's my final answer to this question? I'm just going to erase this A and replace it with the number 2. And this is my final answer to the question. And I could check on Desmos when I type this in, does it make this graph? Ignore the example 5, it should be example 2. Okay, so now what you're gonna do is you're gonna either rewatch this video, or if you feel confident, you're gonna attempt the 2 middle parts, part 2 on your assignment, and then you are gonna turn it in. It's due by midnight, and I will see you guys Thursday or Friday.